In the dense woods of Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, where shadows danced with eerie grace and whispers seemed to echo endlessly, there existed a tale whispered among locals, a legend that chilled the bones of those who dared to listen. It was a legend born of the internet's darkest corners, an urban myth twisted with the fabric of reality. It was the legend of Jeff the Killer. In the heart of these dark woods, far from the comforting glow of civilization, lay an abandoned cabin. It stood decrepit and weather-worn, its windows shattered like gaping eyes, and its walls adorned with graffiti, marking it as a place to be feared. Few dared to venture near, for tales spoke of a presence lurking within, a presence that left a trail of fear and dread in its wake. Among the locals, whispers of Jeff the Killer circulated like a dark cloud, his legend growing with each passing night. They spoke of a faceless figure, his pale skin stretched taut over bones, his eyes devoid of light but filled with malice. They spoke of a smile carved into his flesh, a grotesque mockery of humanity that sent shivers down the spine of anyone who dared imagine it. As the legend gained momentum, so did the fear that gripped the hearts of those who lived nearby. Children hurried home before dusk, and even the bravest of souls avoided the woods like the plague. But despite their best efforts to ignore the whispers, they could not shake the feeling that something sinister lurked just beyond the trees. It was on a moonless night, when the woods seemed to hold their breath, that the legend of Jeff the Killer became all too real. A group of teenagers, drawn by the thrill of the unknown, dared each other to visit the abandoned cabin. With hearts pounding and nerves on edge, they ventured into the darkness, their flashlights casting feeble beams into the night. As they approached the cabin, a sense of foreboding washed over them like a tidal wave. The air grew thick with tension, and every rustle of the leaves sent shivers down their spines. And then, as if summoned by their curiosity, he appeared. Jeff the Killer emerged from the shadows, his presence sending a wave of terror crashing over the group. His face, twisted into a permanent grin, filled them with a primal fear unlike anything they had ever known. With a single glance, he silenced their screams, his eyes locking onto theirs with a hunger that chilled them to the core. In that moment, they realized the true horror of the legend they had dared to confront. Jeff the Killer was no mere story spun from the depths of the internet, he was a nightmare given form, a creature of pure darkness that defied explanation. And as they stood frozen in terror, they knew that they were no match for the evil that lurked within the woods of Lancaster County. The following morning, when the sun reluctantly peeked over the horizon, casting its feeble light upon the woods of Lancaster County, a gruesome discovery awaited the residents. A group of hikers stumbled upon the remains of the teenagers, their bodies suspended from the branches of gnarled trees, twisted into grotesque positions that defied the laws of nature. Their faces were gone, stripped from their skulls with surgical precision, leaving behind only raw, gaping wounds where once features had resided. In their place, carved into the flesh with cruel intent, were twisted smiles that mirrored the grim visage of Jeff the Killer himself. The authorities were called, their arrival heralding a sense of dread that hung heavy in the air. As they surveyed the scene, their expressions grim and their stomachs turning with nausea, they knew that this was no ordinary crime. This was the work of a madman, a monster that walked among them in the guise of a legend. The news spread like wildfire, igniting fear in the hearts of the residents of Lancaster County. They whispered of curses and demons, of things that lurked in the shadows and preyed upon the unsuspecting. And as they locked their doors and barred their windows, they knew that they were no longer safe in their own homes. For Jeff the Killer had become more than just a legend. He had become a nightmare made flesh, a terror that haunted the darkest corners of their minds. And as the days turned into weeks and the weeks turned into months, his presence loomed over Lancaster County like a specter of death, a reminder that some legends were all too real. As the news of the horrific incident spread, a sense of unease settled over Lancaster County like a thick fog. The authorities tried to quell the rising fear, dismissing Jeff the Killer as nothing more than an urban legend, a figment of overactive imaginations fueled by internet folklore. They assured the public that the heinous acts were the work of a deranged copycat, a disturbed individual seeking notoriety through imitation. But despite their attempts to downplay the situation, the people of Lancaster County could not shake the feeling of dread that gripped their hearts. The brutal murders, eerily reminiscent of the tales whispered in hushed tones, seemed to defy rational explanation. And when the news reporters, the very voices of reason and truth, became victims themselves, doubt began to creep into the minds of even the staunchest skeptics. The discovery of the newscasters, their faces mutilated beyond recognition and twisted into grotesque smiles, sent shockwaves through the community. It was as if the fabric of reality itself had been torn asunder, revealing a darkness that lurked just beneath the surface. The authorities scrambled to contain the panic, but their efforts were in vain as the people of Lancaster County grappled with the terrifying truth. Jeff the Killer was real. No longer confined to the realm of urban legend, he walked among them, his presence a chilling reminder of the horrors that lurked in the shadows. And as the sun set over the darkened woods of Lancaster County, casting long shadows that seemed to reach out with malevolent intent, the people huddled in fear, knowing that they were not alone. For Jeff the Killer was watching, his twisted smile cutting through the darkness like a blade, his eyes gleaming with a hunger that could never be sated. And as the night stretched on, filled with the echoes of screams and the whispers of terror, the people of Lancaster County knew that they would never be safe again. In the wake of the news of Jeff the Killer's terrifying presence, fear spread like wildfire through the streets of Lancaster County. No longer confined to the shadows of the woods, the horror now stalked the very homes and neighborhoods of the unsuspecting residents. House after house, person after person, the gruesome scenes repeated themselves with sickening regularity. Families awakened to find their loved ones missing, only to discover their mutilated bodies later, their faces stripped of identity and their lips twisted into haunting grins. The once tranquil streets echoed with the anguished cries of those left behind, their grief mingling with the palpable sense of dread that hung heavy in the air. The authorities, overwhelmed and outmatched by the sheer brutality of the killings, struggled to maintain order in the face of chaos. Panic-stricken residents barricaded themselves indoors, their windows shuttered and doors bolted tight, but even the safety of their own homes offered no solace from the encroaching terror. As the death toll rose and the once vibrant community descended into a state of paralyzing fear, whispers of despair and resignation filled the air. Some spoke of fleeing the cursed county, seeking refuge in distant lands far from the reach of the nightmare that had taken root in their midst. Others resigned themselves to their fate, knowing that there was no escape from the relentless grip of fear that had enveloped them. But amidst the darkness and despair, a flicker of defiance burned in the hearts of a few brave souls. They refused to cower in the face of evil, rallying together to confront the terror that threatened to consume them all. Armed with nothing but their courage and determination, they ventured into the heart of the darkness, determined to put an end to the nightmare once and for all. And as they stood united against the horrors that lurked in the shadows, they knew that their struggle was far from over. For Jeff the Killer may have been born from the darkest recesses of the internet, but in Lancaster County, he had become a nightmare all too real. And until he was stopped, the nightmare would never end. The valiant efforts of the group dedicated to patrolling the streets of Lancaster County offered a glimmer of hope in the midst of the pervasive darkness. Armed with determination and a resolve to protect their community, they braved the night, their footsteps echoing through the silent streets as they sought to confront the terror that had gripped their town. But their bravery was met with a grim fate, for even they were not spared from the relentless onslaught of Jeff the Killer's reign of terror. One by one, they disappeared without a trace, their absence a chilling testament to the malevolent force that lurked in the shadows. When their comrades searched for them, their hearts heavy with dread, they found only empty streets and the lingering stench of death. And then, in the cold light of day, their worst fears were realized as they stumbled upon the gruesome remains of those they had once called friends. Their faces were gone, their identities stripped away with cruel precision, leaving behind only gaping wounds where eyes once looked out upon the world with hope and determination. And etched into their lifeless lips were twisted smiles, mocking the very notion of courage and bravery in the face of overwhelming evil. The loss of the brave patrol sent shockwaves through the community, shattering the last vestiges of hope that had remained. Despair settled over Lancaster County like a suffocating blanket, choking the life from the once vibrant town and leaving behind only a shell of its former self. The authorities, powerless to stop the relentless carnage, could offer little comfort to the terrified residents who now lived in constant fear of the unseen horror that lurked in the shadows. And as the days turned into weeks and the weeks turned into months, the memory of the brave patrol faded into obscurity, their sacrifice forgotten by all but those who had loved them most. For in the end, Lancaster County had become a graveyard of broken dreams and shattered hopes, its streets haunted by the ghosts of those who had dared to defy the darkness. And as the sun set on another day, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch out with malevolent intent, the people huddled in fear, knowing that they were no match for the nightmare that had descended upon their town. For Jeff the Killer was real, and in Lancaster County, his reign of terror would never end. As Jeff the Killer crept through the desolate streets of Southside Lancaster City, his malevolent presence casting a pall of dread over the abandoned buildings and silent alleyways, his predatory instincts honed in on a lone figure navigating the shadows. The orphan teenager, a survivor of the relentless carnage that had plagued the town, moved with a grace born of desperation, his senses keenly attuned to the lurking danger that threatened to consume him. With every step, Jeff closed the distance, his haunting knife gleaming in the dim light as he prepared to carry out his sinister routine once more. But as he cornered the teenager in the crumbling ruins of an old abandoned factory, he found himself facing an unexpected adversary. The teenager turned to confront Jeff, his eyes burning with a fierce determination that sent a shiver down the killer's spine. And as Jeff lunged forward, his twisted grin splitting his face in anticipation of the horror to come, he was met with a force he had not anticipated. With astonishing speed and strength, the teenager evaded Jeff's grasp, his movements fluid and precise as he countered the killer's attack with a ferocity that caught Jeff off guard. And in a single fluid motion, the teenager seized Jeff by the shoulders, his grip unyielding as he effortlessly hurled the killer across the room with a strength that belied his youthful appearance. Jeff crashed to the ground with a resounding thud, his body recoiling from the impact as pain seared through his veins. For the first time in his reign of terror, he found himself facing an opponent who refused to cower in fear, a foe whose resilience matched his own. As Jeff struggled to regain his footing, his twisted smile contorted into a grimace of rage and frustration. The teenager stood before him, a beacon of defiance in the darkness, his eyes blazing with a fire that burned brighter than any fear Jeff had ever encountered. And in that moment, as the echoes of their confrontation reverberated through the abandoned factory, Jeff realized that the nightmare he had unleashed upon Lancaster County had met its match. For in the orphan teenager, he had encountered a strength that transcended the horrors of his own creation, a strength born not of darkness, but of the unwavering light of hope. In the dimly lit confines of the abandoned factory, Jeff the killer found himself locked in a deadly dance with the orphan teenager, their confrontation escalating with each passing moment. As Jeff peered into the teenager's eyes, he was met with a sight that sent a chill down his spine. Their depths seemed to glow with an otherworldly brightness, defying the darkness that enveloped the room. With a sudden burst of speed, the teenager drew a gun from his waist, the metal gleaming ominously in the dim light. Jeff's reflexes kicked into overdrive as he barely managed to evade the incoming gunfire, the bullets whizzing past him with deadly accuracy. He darted to the safety of a nearby corner, his heart pounding in his chest as he assessed the situation. The teenager prowled the room with the confidence of a seasoned hunter, his movements calculated and precise as he swept each corner in search of his elusive prey. Jeff watched from his hiding place, his mind racing with questions. Who was this kid? What gave him such unyielding strength and determination? In a desperate bid to evade capture, Jeff scaled the wall with a fluid grace, his movements silent and agile as he clambered onto a network of overhead scaffolding. From his vantage point high above the ground, he waited with bated breath, his senses attuned to the slightest sound below. The teenager continued his search, his footsteps echoing through the cavernous space as he combed through each room with unwavering resolve. Jeff watched intently, his eyes narrowed in anticipation, as the tension between predator and prey reached its boiling point. Who was this enigmatic teenager, and what secrets lay hidden behind those glowing eyes? Jeff knew that the answers to these questions could hold the key to his survival in this deadly game of cat and mouse. And as he waited in the shadows, poised to strike at the opportune moment, he braced himself for the inevitable showdown that would determine the fate of them both. As Jeff the killer crouched on the overhead scaffolding, hidden in the shadows and waiting for his moment to strike, he felt a chill run down his spine as he locked eyes with the teenager below. In that fleeting moment of recognition, time seemed to stand still as they stared at each other, the air thick with tension. Without hesitation, the teenager raised his gun, his finger tightening on the trigger as he took aim at his elusive prey. Jeff's heart pounded in his chest as he swiftly withdrew a handful of throwing knives from his belt, his movements fluid and precise as he prepared to defend himself. The room erupted into chaos as gunfire and whirling blades filled the air, the sound of metal clashing against metal echoing through the cavernous space. Jeff dodged and weaved with cat-like agility, his senses heightened as he deftly evaded the teenager's relentless onslaught. But as the skirmish wore on, Jeff felt a searing pain shoot through his leg as a bullet grazed his flesh, sending him tumbling from his perch and crashing to the ground below. He landed with a thud, his breath coming in ragged gasps as he struggled to regain his footing. With grim determination, the teenager closed in on his wounded prey, his gun held steady as he advanced with unwavering resolve. Jeff staggered to his feet, his leg throbbing with every step as he limped towards the safety of another room, his mind racing with the realization that his time was running out. The teenager pursued relentlessly, his footsteps echoing through the empty corridors as he closed the distance between them. Jeff knew that he could not outrun his determined adversary, and with a sinking feeling in the pit of his stomach, he braced himself for the inevitable confrontation that awaited him. As he stumbled into the darkness of the next room, the teenager hot on his heels, Jeff knew that there would be no escape this time. Their fate was sealed, and as they stood poised on the precipice of a final showdown, the echoes of their struggle reverberated through the abandoned factory, a testament to the deadly dance of predator and prey that had played out within its walls. As Jeff crouched below the looming machinery, his breaths shallow and labored, anticipation coiled like a serpent in the pit of his stomach. He gripped his blade tightly, his knuckles white with tension, as he waited for the inevitable sound of footsteps drawing nearer. And then, as if on cue, the teenager rounded the corner, his eyes narrowing in determination as he locked onto Jeff's hiding place. With a primal instinct born of survival, Jeff lunged forward, his blade slicing through the air with deadly precision as it found its mark in the teenager's shoulder. But to Jeff's shock and disbelief, the outcome was not as he had anticipated. Instead of the satisfying sound of flesh yielding to steel, he was met with an eerie resistance, as if striking solid rock instead of human flesh. And as he watched in horror, his hunting knife shattered into two distinct pieces, the metal splintering and breaking apart with a deafening crack. For a moment, Jeff could only stare in stunned silence, his mind struggling to comprehend the impossible reality before him. How could this mere teenager possess such unyielding strength and resilience? How could he defy the laws of nature with such ease? But there was no time for contemplation, no room for doubt, as the teenager recoiled from the blow, his eyes burning with a fierce determination that sent a chill down Jeff's spine. With a defiant roar, he launched himself at Jeff, his fists clenched with righteous fury as he prepared to deliver the final blow. Jeff staggered backwards, his mind racing with panic as he scrambled for a means of escape. But as he frantically searched for a way out, he knew deep down that there was no escaping the relentless pursuit of the teenager who had become his most formidable adversary. And as the two clashed in a final, desperate struggle for survival, the echoes of their confrontation reverberated through the abandoned factory, a testament to the inexorable march of fate that had brought them to this moment of reckoning. In a flash of desperate violence, the orphan teenager raised his .44 Magnum, the cold steel of the gun glinting in the dim light of the abandoned factory. With unerring accuracy, he fired shot after shot, each bullet finding its mark with lethal precision. The crack of gunfire echoed through the empty corridors as the bullets tore through the air, tearing through Jeff the killer's twisted form with unstoppable force. His grotesque grin twisted into a mask of agony as he staggered backwards, his blood staining the floor in a macabre tableau of death. With each successive shot, Jeff's once formidable frame faltered, his movements growing sluggish and unsteady as the life slowly drained from his broken body. And as the final bullet found its mark, piercing through his chest with a sickening thud, Jeff the Killer collapsed to the ground in a motionless heap, his reign of terror brought to a sudden and definitive end. The orphan teenager stood over his fallen adversary, his chest heaving with exhaustion and triumph as he surveyed the scene before him. The nightmare that had plagued Lancaster County for far too long had finally been vanquished, its dark legacy extinguished by the unwavering resolve of one brave soul. But as the echoes of gunfire faded into the silence of the abandoned factory, the teenager knew that the battle was far from over. For the scars left behind by Jeff the Killer's reign of terror ran deep, and the wounds inflicted upon the town of Lancaster County would take time to heal. Yet amidst the devastation and despair, there flickered a glimmer of hope, a hope born from the courage and resilience of those who refused to surrender to the darkness. And as the teenager stood amidst the ruins of their final confrontation, he vowed to honor the memory of those who had fallen, and to ensure that their sacrifice would never be forgotten. For in the end, it was not the darkness that prevailed, but the indomitable light of hope that shone bright in the face of adversity. And as the sun rose over the horizon, casting its warm rays upon the battered town of Lancaster County, a new day dawned, a day filled with promise and the promise of a brighter tomorrow. With deliberate intent, the orphan teenager retrieved a can of spray paint from his pocket, the metallic click of the nozzle echoing through the empty factory as he prepared to leave his mark on the walls of the dilapidated building. With a steady hand, he pressed the nozzle and watched as the paint hissed and sputtered, leaving behind bold, defiant letters that spelled out a single word: Vanquishing. As the final stroke of paint dried on the wall next to Jeff the Killer's lifeless body, the teenager moved with purpose, his steps echoing through the cavernous space as he approached the looming electrical switch. With a sense of finality, he reached out and flipped the switch, flooding the old loom mill with a brilliant cascade of light that banished the shadows and illuminated every dark corner. With the room bathed in light, the teenager withdrew a burner phone from his pocket, his fingers flying across the keypad as he dialed the familiar digits of emergency services. His voice was steady and resolute as he spoke into the receiver, his words carrying the weight of truth and justice. "The man behind the slaughter is in this location," he declared, his voice ringing out with unwavering conviction. "Send help immediately." And with that final act of bravery, the teenager stood amidst the wreckage of his harrowing ordeal, knowing that he had done what needed to be done. Jeff the Killer was no more, his reign of terror brought to a decisive end by the unyielding courage of one determined soul. As he awaited the arrival of the authorities, the teenager cast a solemn gaze upon the scene before him, the graffiti on the wall serving as a stark reminder of the darkness that had once threatened to consume his home. But in that moment, amidst the flickering glow of the factory lights, he found solace in the knowledge that he had triumphed over evil, and that hope had prevailed in the face of unimaginable horror. For in the end, it was not the darkness that defined him, but the light that burned bright within his heart, a light that would guide him through the darkness and illuminate the path to a brighter tomorrow. And as he awaited the dawn of a new day, the teenager knew that he would carry the memory of this fateful night with him always, a testament to the strength and resilience of the human spirit in the face of adversity. As the distant wail of police sirens grew nearer, the orphan teenager cast one final glance at the lifeless body of Jeff the Killer, a bitter sneer twisting his lips as he beheld the grotesque puddle of blood that stained the floor beneath him. "Rot in fucking piss and shit," he muttered under his breath, his words laced with venomous contempt for the monster that had terrorized his town for far too long. With a sense of grim satisfaction, Vanquishing turned on his heel and vanished into the shadows, his movements swift and silent as he melted into the darkness of the abandoned factory. He knew that his work here was done, and that it was now up to the authorities to uncover the grisly truth of what had transpired within those walls. As he disappeared into the night, leaving behind only the echoes of his footsteps and the fading memory of Jeff the Killer's reign of terror, Vanquishing felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The nightmare that had haunted Lancaster County had finally been vanquished, its legacy consigned to the annals of history. And as he disappeared into the darkness, Vanquishing knew that he would carry the memory of this fateful night with him, always a reminder of the darkness that lurked in the hearts of men, and the unwavering light of hope that could banish even the most formidable of shadows. For in the end, it was not the darkness that defined him, but the courage and resilience that burned bright within his soul, a light that would guide him through the darkest of nights and into a future filled with promise and possibility. As dawn broke over Lancaster County, casting its golden light upon the quiet streets and abandoned buildings, the news of Jeff the Killer's demise spread like wildfire through the town. Reporters descended upon the scene of the final confrontation, their cameras capturing every grisly detail as they chronicled the events that had unfolded within the walls of the old loom mill. The headlines blared with sensationalism, proclaiming the downfall of the infamous serial killer at the hands of a mysterious figure known only as Vanquishing. Eyewitness accounts painted a vivid picture of the harrowing confrontation that had taken place, with tales of bravery and heroism emerging from the darkness that had once shrouded the town in fear. As the news coverage unfolded, the name Vanquishing echoed through the streets of Lancaster County, whispered in hushed tones and spoken with a mixture of reverence and awe. Who was this enigmatic figure who had dared to defy the darkness and confront the nightmare that had plagued their town for so long? Speculation ran rampant as residents exchanged theories and rumors about the true identity of Vanquishing, but one thing was certain: he had become a symbol of hope and courage in the face of overwhelming adversity. His actions had inspired a newfound sense of unity and resilience among the people of Lancaster County, a testament to the indomitable spirit that burned bright within their hearts. And as the news coverage continued, shining a spotlight on the heroism of Vanquishing and the fall of Jeff the Killer, the town of Lancaster County began to heal from the wounds inflicted by fear and despair. Though the scars of their ordeal would linger, they knew that they had emerged stronger and more united than ever before. For in the end, it was not the darkness that defined them, but the light that shone bright in the face of adversity, a light that would guide them through the darkest of nights and into a future filled with promise and possibility. And as they looked to the horizon with newfound hope, they knew that the legend of Vanquishing would live on, a beacon of courage and resilience in a world fraught with darkness and uncertainty. With the final echoes of the news coverage fading into the distance, the town of Lancaster County stood on the brink of a new chapter in its history. The darkness that had once gripped the town with fear and despair had been vanquished, replaced by a sense of hope and renewal that permeated the very air. In the days and weeks that followed, the memory of Vanquishing and his heroic stand against Jeff the Killer became the stuff of legend, whispered in the quiet corners of Lancaster County and passed down from one generation to the next. His name became synonymous with courage and resilience, a reminder that even in the face of unimaginable horror, there was always hope. As the town began to rebuild and heal from the scars of its ordeal, the spirit of unity and solidarity that had emerged in the wake of Vanquishing's bravery remained steadfast. The people of Lancaster County knew that they had faced their darkest hour together, and that they had emerged stronger and more resilient than ever before. And so, as the sun set on another day in Lancaster County, casting its warm rays upon the quiet streets and bustling neighborhoods, the town looked to the future with hope and optimism. For in the end, it was not the darkness that defined them, but the light that burned bright within their hearts, a light that would guide them through whatever challenges lay ahead. And as they moved forward into the unknown, they knew that they would always carry with them the memory of Vanquishing and his unwavering courage, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there was always hope, and that the light would always triumph over the darkness. The end.